Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're going to be unboxing HeroQuest. Now, obviously we're going to be unboxing the new one because, as you can tell, the old one has already been unboxed 100,000,000 times before. The reason we're unboxing HeroQuest is because the channel recently got over 2,000 subscribers. So to celebrate, we are going to be giving away a copy of HeroQuest for one of our lucky subscribers. So if you want to find out how to enter the competition, check the little link up here in the top right hand corner or possibly down in the description box below. But nevertheless, HeroQuest is an old favorite of mine. It's the board game that got me into board gaming. And this is going to be a lovely little nostalgia trip because as I unbox this, I'm going to be doing a comparison between the old game and the new game. Now, there's already a couple of interesting things I have noticed. The original game is for ages 10 to adult and 2 to 5 players, whereas the new game is ages 14 up and for 2 to 5 players. So I'm kind of curious as to what bumped the age up another 4 years. There's also one or two other subtle differences. As you can see here, you have the barbarian, the wizard, the dwarf, but the elf is actually a lady, whereas in the old classic HeroQuest, the elf is a lad. Now, the artwork is obviously quite similar, but a bit more modernized and a bit more glossy. The other major difference is the size of the box. This thing is huge, whereas this thing, whilst also huge, is not quite as deep. So I think there's a better storage solution for your game here in this one than there would be in the old one. So with no further ado, let's open this box and see what we have inside. Now, one thing I did notice is that there's no actual seal over. You just have these kind of little plastic lips that come in at the side, which is, well, I don't know. I mean, it works out the same anyway because you're going to be opening it regardless. But it would have been nice if it had a kind of a proper seal around it just to protect the actual box itself. But there is 70 little minis in this. So opening the box for the very first time, we are greeted with a poster. So, oh no, not a poster. We're greeted with what are probably the minis. So yes, we have the minis here. So what we'll do is we'll put this to one side for the moment. And we have another layer as well, which is, I presume, more minis. So already, that's a big marked improvement that you have an effective storage solution for your HeroQuest figures, and you'll know if any are missing. We also have here the board. Now, the board I am going to be very interested in because it is obviously inspired by the old board. It's practically the same, except there is a subtle little difference in the square sizes. I think the minis are a bit bigger, so the board had to change size accordingly. So this is the old board here, and this is the new one. Now, as you can see, it is much bigger. It is roughly the same depth, but there's this much upwards extra on the board. So yeah, you won't be able to kind of take all the minis from the new one into the old system. So if you were thinking, for example, of just buying the expansion packs for the new HeroQuest game, they won't fit on the old HeroQuest game. So just a little bit of word of warning there for people. But otherwise, it is pretty much the same. Obviously, dolled up and glossed a little bit nicely. But nevertheless, the board is there and it's bigger. We have here the tokens and the player shield. So let's open this and see what we have. So this is the player shield, and you have the DM, of course, has all the details here. So you have the basic rules here, monsters, and the chart, which is actually very handy for the DM if he's going to be controlling some of the monsters. And you have, of course, the symbols here as well for the dice. So we'll have a look at the old symbol. So this is the old shield. Not a desperate amount of difference. I mean, obviously the artwork is much more glossy and nicer in the old one in comparison to the older one, but the older one still, you know, this was so incredibly cool at the time. And of course it has the background here as well. Now the only difference is this has the furniture, whereas the old one, or the new one, has the actual monster stats. So that's an interesting change, but Zorgon is still Zorgon. So we'll put that aside. We have here the quest book. Now this is nice and small, kind of a small comic book size. So you have different things here. Now this is actually much better way of presenting it. So we have several quests, and you have, of course, a template for your own quests here at the end, which is a great idea. So we have 14 quests in total, and you have a summary here of the actual monsters, whereas the quest book in the old box was something similar. Now we have different quests, I believe. So this is something that I am actually quite happy about, that there's new fresh quests. So we have here, which is the maze, which was the introductory, and here we have the trial. So the second quest, of course, was the rescue of Sir Ragnar, and of course here we have the rescue of Sir Ragnar. So there is some new quests, and some, possibly all the old quests are still here. So we have the Lair of the Orc Warlord, Lair of the Orc Warlord, and we have Prince Magnus's Gold and Prince Magnus's Gold. So as you can see, the stats are all largely the same with one or two exceptions. There's an extra monster here, I notice, that there isn't there. The traps, of course, are outlined a little bit better. So there's extra monsters in the new HeroQuest in different positions and different places. So like here, for example, there's 3 monsters here on this new sheet as opposed to the old one, which just jumped off the table. So it's kind of, I presume it's taken in some of the new monsters in the new game that weren't present in the old game. So the reason this is making me happy is, okay, it's a reimagining of the game, but there's subtle differences. So if you have played a lot of HeroQuest as a child and you have the old one like me, and there's still some value into buying the new one, apart from just the upgrade, that there's actual changes to the quests. So I won't go through them all because I don't want to spoil them. We have here the tokens, which are the standard tokens. So you have, of course, the stairs, the walls. This is a new token I haven't seen before. You have the skulls, you have the pitfalls, and similar again on this side as well. So that's interesting. And we have the game system rulebook here. So the rules are fairly straightforward, and I presume there's an FAQ here at the back, and in the quests, game notes, lost artifacts. So excellent. So we have a simple rulebook here, whereas the rulebook here is actually smaller. I think this was 15 pages, and this one is 22 pages. So there is some little extra goodies in there. We also have an empty base at the bottom of this. So I'm not sure why that is. Probably to make room for expansions, I'd imagine. So that was the core part of the unboxing. Now we'll go to the interesting stuff, which is the minis. So we'll start here with this one. And we have here, of course, the heroes and the monsters. So we'll zoom in and we'll have a look at some of these. Now this is the Gargoyle, and we'll have a look at his older compatriot. Here we go. So, slightly different. This is a bit more kind of comically, nevertheless, it is cool. I actually quite like this one. His wings are in here somewhere as well. But as you can see, there is a difference comparison. Now, the base is round, whereas the old bases are square. So, as you can see, there is a significant update on the figures. But nevertheless, the old figures are still nice and cool. We have new monsters, which are kind of fishmen that I don't have any minis to compare with. It's also a very secure board. We have here the goblins. Now, the goblins have improved drastically. So you have the old kind of classic Games Workshop kind of goblin thing, but whereas the new fella is much more kind of more lifelike, if you know what I mean. These fellas are just kind of a straight up pose. I mean, there was nothing wrong with them. They're of their time, whereas the new ones look, I have to say, they look gorgeous. So, like, they've given it a hood. He's a much more dynamic pose, and I'd say much more threatening. We have here a female goblin. Now, that's interesting. So instead of just having one goblin all the time, we have a lady goblin as well. So she's thinner, but very sinister looking. She's 2 daggers. So this is actually a really nice touch that I didn't see before. So as you can see, the miniatures have got a marked improvement. The other thing is they're not actually too big. They'll actually fit on the old board, I'd say. I'd assumed that they wouldn't, but they're practically, the only difference is these are square and these are round, but otherwise they would fit on the old board. We have here the mummy. So I have the old mummy here. So, hold on, just get the focus. So we have the old mummy here and the new mummy here. So again, a much more dynamic pose, a little bit thinner, but no, pretty cool. I don't know why I kind of like the older one in this case, but nevertheless, it's a much more lifelike, dynamic pose. We have, of course, the knights. Now this is a beautiful miniature. That is outstanding and is much better than the old kind of Chaos Knight. So that is definitely a marked improvement. Yeah, no, I have to say that is my favorite looking mini so far. The detail is very good on them. We have the orcs, and what's nice as well is that the orcs come in 2 different poses. So we have an axe-wielding orc, and we have one with the actual blade, whereas the old orcs were more classic Games Workshop, kind of stunty, squatty lads, whereas the new fellas are much more lifelike, much more kind of Lord of the Rings Uruk, rather than kind of the classic orcs. Nevertheless, these have their charm, but I have to say I am very impressed so far with the detail of the minis on offer here. So we'll check the heroes. So the first one we'll check, of course, would have to be the iconic Barbarian. Now, my old Barbarian, unfortunately, has a bit of a bendy sword. And as you can see, there is a marked improvement here. I mean, he's much more kind of Conan the Barbarian, like with a much bigger, thicker kind of broadsword. You can see he's a great kind of pose here on the back. And if, of course, this is where you quote that famous HeroQuest video with the muscularity. Yeah, to be honest with you, there's no comparison. I mean, the old one is of its time. I mean, I have a graw for it, but his little bendy sword is comparison to the new kind of heroic looking Barbarian. Yeah, there's just a marked improvement in the minis. We have here the dwarf, which is also, I mean, there's no comparison with the old one. The old fella is kind of squatty and pose-liked, which I presume was the best they could do with the technology at the time, whereas the new fella is much more dynamic and fluid. As you can see, he's bracing, he's about to swing this big huge axe, and as you can see, the size difference in the axes as well. So it's yeah, there's just no comparison. I mean, we have here the new lady elf, whereas the elf is male in the old one. So kind of a rogue, which I think was actually a good choice, you know, because games are for everyone, and everyone should be represented in them. So the fact that there's a female elf here is much better. And yeah, I mean, if you want to play the old character, you can, like, but she is there. So we have finally the wizard, which, as you can see, my wizard lost the top of his staff, but the new one is actually a very similar kind of pose, a bit more dynamic, a bit more realistic kind of. Actually, would you believe it? This one is a bit more action. I actually prefer this mini, even though it's obviously not as good as this. It just has a more kind of impressive, wizardy kind of action, whereas this guy he looks like he's either flagging for a bus or waving hello. Nevertheless, the dice are here as well. So, as you can see, they're very, well, this is going to sound strange, but they're very square dice, if you know what I mean. Normally there's a bit of a roundness in the edges here, but these are very square. As you can see, they don't look like bunny rabbit ears anymore. The old dice I have, as you can see, the comparison here is they've obviously made it a much more sinister looking symbol. People used to say these were the bunny rabbit ears, but yeah, it's a more sinister kind of looking monster symbol. The skull is the skull, and the shield is a bit more heroic with the a tad more heroic with the lion, as opposed to kind of a different classic lion. So those are the dice, and those are the figures. The last comparison I'll make is with the skeletons, and very similar size again, but yeah, there's no competition. These are just much better. More dynamic pose. You have bits of the old armor and clothing on the new skeleton, and the scythe is a bit more sinister. But nevertheless, beautiful job on these miniatures, I have to say. So that was the minis themselves. Let's have a look at the next part, which I presume is the furniture. So, we also have character sheets here, and you have a huge amount of them. So that is a good thing to see, because, you know, it'd take you a while to get through all of those. And we have here, of course, the cards. So what we'll do is have a quick look at the cards and see what we have. Now, the art style has changed slightly. This is not the original art, but it is very reminiscent of it. So you have here like things like the gem, you have gold, you have hazard with a kind of a new figure, you have potion of healing, potion of strength. Now you have a female barbarian here, which is interesting. So maybe in the future we'll have, they'll do different genders for the heroes. You have a wandering monster, which was much better than the old wandering monster card, which I should have here. Yeah, the old wandering monster looks like a bit of a pig, whereas the new wandering monster is actually legitimately terrifying. So the art style is reminiscent, and it's in line with the kind of the aesthetic. You have the genie, the swift wind, the tempest. So the tempest has the poor old of course, this is the spell cards for the wizard. So you're actually lifting one of the poor goblins in the air with that. You have the fire spells here, the air spells, the water spells, and the earth spells, I would imagine. So these are actually dread spells. Now that's interesting. So there's new cards here which are dread spells. Summon undead. So I presume this is for a boss, that Cloud of Dread. This is possibly for a boss or a similar character that they're using spells against the actual players. So, and we have here treasure cards and equipment cards and artifact cards. We have here the actual stat cards, so you can see the elf is here, the wizard is here, you have player aids, and you have the dwarf and the barbarian, and we have here the monster cards. So I mean, they look brilliant. The art style has just been drastically improved from, say, the old monster cards to the new monster cards. So these are all the different bits and pieces. I'm going to put them to one side and we'll have a look at the furnishings. Now the furniture in the old set is predominantly cardboard with bits of plastic, whereas here it is almost entirely plastic. Now this, as you can see, is the set of drawers. Now there's no rat or skull on top of it, but I do see little rats here that you can probably adorn your game with. We have the bookcase, which again is here. So a similar size actually, but yeah, this is actually heavy plastic. So that's not going to move very easily. So that's pretty cool. The other thing, and this is a godsend, doors that are actually already pre-fit. The biggest pain in my life in the old HeroQuest game was having to slot the doors into these things every single time. Now they're just doors and they're open and they're closed. So we have closed doors and we have open doors. So you can just swap it out, which is basically a godsend. We have here the throne. So that's actually really nice. That's a lovely sculpt there. We have tables, which are pretty cool. They kind of have an impression of feet at the bottom, literal actual feet. So we have the armory. Now the only thing I don't like about this is it's very hard to get these out. So if you have a smallie that just can't wait to get their hands on this, they might break some of these plastic pieces if they take them out too roughly. So this is the actual armory, whereas the armory in the older one is actually very similar. Practically the same, except obviously there's a monster shield here and 2 hero shields up here. You have the fireplace, which again is a marked improvement, as you can see. So the fact that it's all hard plastic means that you can paint it. I've noticed here as well that we have skulls here and rats here and 4 of each. So I presume that what you can do is you can adorn different pieces with rats and skulls as you see fit. We have here, of course, the rack, the torture chamber. That was the old rack, and this is the new rack. So again, a similar size. It surprised me that the board is so much more bigger because they seem to have kind of sized the pieces together similarly. But nevertheless, the old one has its charm, but the new one, of course, just looks amazing. And of course, we already had a look at the throne, but this is the old throne in comparison to the new throne. And last but not least, the treasure chests. So these are obviously a marked improvement again on the old treasure chests, which were basically just little pieces of cardboard. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was HeroQuest. A game that I'm very much looking forward to trying out, especially now that I know there's new monsters and new ways, little subtle differences to the game. So if you are interested in winning your very own copy of this, please check out the link again to the competition video. And with no further ado, if you liked this video, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And until next time, good luck, God bless, and happy HeroQuesting.